Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Jonathan Passmore, Professor of Coaching and Behavioral Change at the Henley Business School and Senior Vice President at CoachHub. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Pretty good, Chris. How are you doing?
Not too bad. It's actually quite strange that I get to speak to people from the UK now. So it's been a while. So it's nice to speak to someone. Where are you based?
So I'm based just north of London in Hertfordshire.
Are you working full-time remote from home now?
Full-time working from home. Lots of engagements on platforms such as this.
I bet you we're living in the metaverse now. I think that's what it is. According to Zuckerberg. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are now at CoachHub.
So I'm a psychologist, and my original training as a psychologist was a master's degree in organizational psychology. So I'm a chartered occupational psychologist. And then as I continued my psychology career working with a range of companies like PwC, IBM, and some city consulting firms, I got increasingly interested in coaching. So I then took some period of time to part-time work on a PhD, a doctorate research around coaching and its potential for helping leaders to change. I completed that in 2008, and whilst I was doing that, I spent some time working at the University of East London. I've then come back into the world of consulting, spent some time working in my own consultancy firm. We were doing leadership and development across safety critical industries, so construction, oil and gas, and then went back to an academic role as Professor of Coaching Behavioral Change at Henley Business School, helping to build their accredited coach training programs, and those are available in the UK and in about 10 other destinations across the world, but also online. And then most recently, I've taken up a position as Senior VP at CoachHub, digital coaching platform, helping organizations to democratize coaching. So that's about spreading coaching deeper into an organization, creating coaching cultures. And throughout that time, I've been researching and writing. So I've written around about 30 books and over 100 scientific papers. And I use that academic practice, that research, to drive my organizational practice. So I'm interested in that balance between evidence and how we can explore the evidence, but bring that into the applied world to make a difference for our clients and the organizations who we work with.
Absolutely love that. So I'm still stumped that you said 30 books. So I'm still trying to get over that part. How you managed to have time to write 30 books. What would you say has kept you engaged in this work for so long?
Well, I'm fascinated by the one-to-one work with individuals. So I've had the privilege to work with many organizational senior leaders in the public and private sector in the UK, across Europe and in the Middle East. I've also worked with some celebrities and helped them think about the way that they work and they show themselves in terms of their personal profiles. And I've had the privilege to work with politicians, cabinet ministers in the UK, to help them think about how they navigate the political world and their wider systems. So working with cabinet colleagues, working with the civil service. And in each of those assignments that I've undertaken, it's fascinating to both get an inside perspective about the individual and then to work with them in service to help them to be the best person that they can be. And that's a real privilege that people are so honest and open in those confidential coaching conversations, that you can really get an inside view of the person, but also help them to think through what might they be doing next? How might they engage with their colleagues to optimize their performance and the performance of their organization or their government? And in terms of the research, I think when I started out in the whole coaching field back in really around the late 1990s, there was very little research. And many of us who were having those conversations that sometimes we called coaching, sometimes we were describing as career conversations, really we were just drawing on our knowledge of wider psychology and going with a feeling of what we thought would be helpful for clients. And there was a range of case studies. I contributed some of those in the 1990s and early 2000s. But we didn't have any evidence to demonstrate this is the most effective way to contract, or here's the best way to work with clients. And so I was very keen to start exploring some of those aspects. And I couldn't call for other people to do the research if I wasn't stepping up myself.
Yeah.
And that drew me into that area of, well, let's do some research. Let's do some randomized control trials. Let's do some studies to see whether this intervention is as powerful as we think. So we did randomized control trials in a number of areas and demonstrated that coaching was more powerful than training, more effective in terms of the better outcomes, and also reducing the time to learn. We also talked to individual clients and coaches about their experience. We've got some understanding of the ingredients. What were the magic ingredients that enabled coaching conversations to make a real difference, that were appreciated by leaders and managers and organizations? And I played a small part. There are many other colleagues across the field, Rebecca Jones, Eric DeHaan, David Clutterbuck, Tony Grant, of course, who have done fabulous work in this area. And together, over the last 20 years, we've made a few steps forward that give us a better understanding that we can now say conclusively, coaching works. We have a good understanding of the critical ingredients that go together for an effective coaching conversation. And so when we're talking to leaders and managers in organizations, if they don't have coaching as part of their wider HR strategy, the question must always be, why?
Yeah.
And when are you going to be introducing it?
It must be very, fascinating, to work with all those different individuals and organizations and see the challenges and the growth and the application of your research and then the results it's actually having in real life. Because I speak to a lot of academics and sometimes they miss that part where they don't get to actually be hands-on and then implement the work and work with the leaders and organizations, where you've been in both worlds, which I'm sure is very satisfying, seeing the value of the work come to life and the impact it can have in people's lives.
Absolutely, Chris. I've been very lucky that my career has taken me across those boundaries, having the opportunity to work with academic colleagues to do high quality research, but to then take that research, that knowledge that's being created, and apply it in organizations. And you're right, sometimes organizations work without evidence, and that's really sad to see, that they're doing things that are not based on science, not based on evidence. It's almost as though we have a global pandemic and people are thinking, well, I know what we should do is if you drink a glass of water 3 times a day, that will cure the virus. Well, there's no evidence to support that, but sometimes our HR interventions are a little bit like that. They're based on myth and legend, not science. And on the other side, of course, working with academic colleagues, doing fabulous work, but those ivory towers sometimes lock that knowledge inside. So if we can find ways to get both groups to interact with each other, to share that great evidence and knowledge that's coming out, to translate it into practical steps the real HR leaders can use in their organizations, and encourage those HR leaders to start thinking about how do we draw that in, that knowledge, that science, into our organization to optimize individual performance and organizational success. That has got to be the way forward.
Yeah. For leaders, the last 12 or 18 months, nearly 2 years now, has been super challenging. How can coaching help manage or help leaders in uncertain times?
Well, I think a whole range of different things that coaching can do to help during these challenging times of COVID and remote working and the transition that we're going through in the world of work. I think one of the things that it does is that in a workplace where in the past organizations saw the leader as being able to closely monitor day by day, hour by hour even, members of their team as to what they were doing and potentially take a more commanding style of leadership, that's gone. And instead, in a hybrid world where we don't even know what our colleagues on that Zoom call are wearing beneath the waist, we need a different style of leadership. We need a style of leadership that's much more empowering, that's more delegating, that encourages people to take more personal responsibility. And coaching can be that default leadership style. The leader can encourage people to reflect themselves. What are their priorities? what are the different choices, the different options they have available? What might be the consequences for each of these? And to encourage team members to step up themselves, set clearer goals for themselves, think about the system in which they're operating, and to drive forward their performance without having to micromanage them. Mm-hmm. The second area I think that's very useful during this transition phase is around helping individuals to be supported when many people are working from home. And we know from a lot of the data that's coming forward as a result of the impact of COVID, people working from home, there's the challenge around work-life balance. So how do I continue to do my job when my children are screaming in the background because they're not in school? Yeah. How do I continue to do my job when I'm worrying about my parents who currently are suffering with COVID or maybe in hospital? How do I continue to do my job when I don't actually have a room in which to take the work and I'm sitting on the breakfast table and just across the other side is my partner, who's also at the breakfast table, also on another Zoom call because he or she are working from home. So there's an issue about supporting individuals in that work-life balance. But for some individuals who are working from home, that might be working from a bedsit or working from a position where they're the only person in their home, how do we provide them with support mechanisms to prevent them being lonely, to enable them to feel engaged and connected to the mission of the organization, to the goals of their team and their wider system? And I think coaching can come in here to help people think through prioritization of work, can come in here to help people feel supported, and particularly online. And I as a digital coach who's been using online coaching platforms for a number of years, being able to connect to people at a time that's convenient to them, at a time zone that may be different from our standard working day. So connecting to people early in the morning or later at night because they're in a different time zone, connecting to people when they need to connect, not having to book a month in advance because you can get there with a train journey or you have to fit it into a wider set of diary commitments. That responsiveness can also be amazingly supportive and thus be a complement to the work that the line manager does. Mm-hmm. So I think these are two individual issues, and then taking a systemic view around coaching and the role it plays is helping the individual to see, particularly as a leader, how their role, how their mission, how their purpose connects across the organization. So allowing them to look in this more isolated way of working as a leader to think about the connections between the different parts of the organization. And when we were all working physically together, as we step back working maybe 1, 2, 3, sometimes 5 days a week from home, what are the connections? Who do I need to engage with to ensure that I bring colleagues along with me to achieve the outcomes that we are interested in as an organization?
Yeah. And that last part as well, it's not going to happen on its own anymore, right? You need to be intentional about that. You're not going to bump into someone in the office now or have those organic moments, or, you know, a lot of the physical seeing people in the office, you can see, okay, perhaps that person's not doing so well by their body language or, you know, them turning up late or whatever that may be. You can't see that at home. So there may be employees around the world that are struggling or live alone, have these issues, and we just don't know about it. As well. Was that one of the reasons that you were attracted to work with CoachHub, to be able to bring this to the world?
Yeah, it's partly that, Chris, but I think that COVID has brought, for many of us, and coaching as one industry in particular, we're at a pivot point in history. And this pivot point means that where we saw old organizational structures, old ways of working, which we're in the office, we're in there 8 to 6, and we operate in a particular way, that has been changing, has been transformed by the impact of COVID. And coaching is an industry in particular where the science and the technology were coming together, and COVID has fused them together to allow a transformation of the industry. So instead of seeing what was typically in the past a cottage-based industry that really was only 20 years old, it hadn't come of age, it hadn't had its coming of age party, and there were small organizations, sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, or maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 people in an organization who were trained coaches. And if you're a big global organization, it meant that coaching was often delivered by these small groups because there weren't huge organizations that you could employ at a global level. And coaching was also frequently delivered face-to-face. So that made it very costly, and that meant that it didn't go very deep into the organization.
Yeah.
With that merger of the science, we know what works and we know how we can leverage coaching, and then the technology. Pretty much everybody has a laptop, everyone's got Wi-Fi, we've got secure platform technologies that are available to ensure confidentiality and protection of organizational data. Coming together in this moment, COVID just flipped the switch, and all of us went, actually, we could do this in a very different way. And CoachHub is an example of the blossoming of that potential, of the coming together of these elements that enables organizations at a global scale to say, we want coaching for our 5,000 managers across the globe in the 100 countries where we operate, or 120 countries, and we want it in 65 languages. We don't want to have 30 or 50 or 60 contracts. We want one contract for all of these individuals, and enabling those people to have as much coaching as they want and when they want it. And we want to be able to evaluate through the data from their engagement how that's impacting our organization. And organizations like CoachHub make that happen. Yeah. Scaling it, evaluating it, and delivering it in a way that now can be a key part of an HR strategy intervention.
Mm-hmm. I think it's incredible, honestly. Like, as you said, there's so many things. You only in my previous organizations, you only ever got coaching when you're in, director, VP or above. And it was only for a select few, as you mentioned, because in person, I've just got a coach recently. He's in the US, right? We jump on a couple of calls a week, and I don't even notice the difference between having it. And I love the fact that organizations like CoachHub democratize coaching in a way, and it's now more inclusive as well, which is fascinating. It must be quite satisfying for you to see this.
Well, what we're seeing that COVID certainly has accelerated the engagement with us as an organization. That people are saying, well, we're already putting in place multiple pieces of software to enable our colleagues to work from home, enable us to operate in a secure way. And digital coaching providers like CoachHub can be part of that solution. So we're seeing a massive acceleration. But what's also fascinating is individuals and those organizations, HR leaders, are saying to us, well, we're really interested in how we measure and evaluate the work that's going on, because we want to be able to present that data to the board. And then we want to be saying, well, we're doing it with 150 people at the moment in a pilot, but wow, if this delivers this amount of value, this return on investment, wouldn't it be great if we do it with 500 or 5,000 managers across our business? So we're seeing that scaling happen of engagement with us. And of course, that's great, both from a practice point of view, that we're democratizing coaching, that it's now available for the many, not the few, but also from a research point of view, when you have all of that non-personalized data, but how are people engaging? Who are the individuals making choices about genders or around ethnicity or topics? Then we can start to help further refine, tune the engine to meet the needs of that specific organization more effectively. And then the final aspect of what we've been doing is building out in multiple languages a lot of learning content, because probably when you meet your US coach, at the end of a coaching conversation, certainly I do this with my clients, they say, well, we've talked about this particular topic, have a read of this article. And I might send them an article from a magazine or a link to a blog, or I might even post a book to them. In the old days, then literally you would be popping down to the post office, putting the book in an envelope and sending it out. Now, on our platform, we'll make a digital link that people can go in and consume a short video that our psychologists have created just for individuals who are interested about work-life balance, or about how they can take forward D&I within their organization. So we have a plethora, thousands of videos and readings that we've created in multiple languages, because this is about helping the manager where they are, not making them read, it's something that we've created, but it's only available in English. And that then further amplifies the coaching intervention. It enables individuals to carry on developing between each of those coaching conversations, which is what we're about. It's a continuous journey.
Yeah. What advice would you give to organizations and leaders and employees, to be honest, about how they can best manage hybrid and work from home?
I think the first thing that they need to be doing is thinking about being flexible to individuals. So I've heard stories of organizations saying everybody's back or nobody's back.
Yeah.
And instead having a flexible approach, clearly taking account of COVID cases in that locality, taking account of the organization's office layout and structures, but being flexible where that organization can be to allow some people to return more frequently and other people to work from home more frequently. So we're being responsive to the individual's needs and reflecting COVID and the nature of jobs. The second thing I think is about helping leaders and managers in the organization think about how work is different in a hybrid world. So what new rules, what new processes, what new practices does the manager need to put in place that will be different to meeting face-to-face? And as we were saying, Chris, in the past, as a leader or manager, if I've got a team on my floor, I might be meeting people with my cup of coffee as I walk down the corridor, chat to a few people informally at the very start of the day. I'd probably see people as I go to a series of meetings, I'm wandering down the corridor, I'll have some further chats, or at the water cooler, or the opportunity to bump into people deliberately or less so in the canteen. And so you have opportunities for all of those informal conversations, building relationships, but also influencing and persuading people. So when that's gone, what new processes do we need to put in place? How do we check out what support individuals need or what their priorities are for the day? So a method such as yesterday, today, and help as an intervention can be really helpful. This is just a chance for a small team, maybe teams of 10 or 15 people, to get together on the start of every day through a very brief call, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, where each person has got 60 seconds to talk about what they achieved yesterday, what their objectives are, top 3 for the day, and what help they might need from their team. And so this is a check-in to help people to focus, but it's also a chance to call upon any support that they need. We might also be bringing people together in various meetings throughout the day. They could be formal meetings, but we also need to create informal structures to replicate those corridor and coffee conversations. So organizations need to think about how can we facilitate this? So that systems, process, and structures needs to be part of that. And then I think the final thing that organizations need to be considering is what additional mechanisms of support that they can put in place. Because working from home, the evidence tells us, is more stressful, so leads to issues around mental health, is more isolating. And once again, individuals might feel disconnected from the purpose, the mission, the objectives of the organization. And thirdly, there are fewer opportunities for that, for thinking through, reflecting on the wider system. And I think this is where coaching can play a really useful part, helping people stay connected with that system and not just about what are my goals, but how do I think about how my work is impacting on colleagues, thinking about how I can feel connected and engaged with the organization and its purpose. And lastly, feeling that wider set of support that I feel as though someone really cares about me, but it's not only my manager who's checking in, there's somewhere else that I can take those conversations about how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I might be doing next.
You mentioned a little bit at the beginning of the podcast, but I want to jump back to it. What do you think are going to be those essential behavioral skills that are going to be needed for people to succeed in 2022 and beyond?
As leaders and managers, always at the top of the list is communication skills and the ability to help colleagues to understand what the organization is focusing on. But most importantly, I talk about the translation of the messaging from the senior team, because often senior teams come up with this fabulous vision and this strategy that they're going to take forward. And somewhere deep down in the organization, that doesn't resonate. It doesn't feel as though the organization or that senior team is really connecting with that employee or employees. So the middle managers need to be thinking about how do we take this messaging and translate it into the words, into the language, into the reality of every day in this particular team. So I think that's going to be an important task and is made more difficult in some respects, or certainly different when we move to remote and hybrid working. I think the second thing that managers need to step up on, and this may begin to dissipate as we move through the pandemic, is that feeling around isolation and anxiety, and how managers can support employees in the work that they're doing so people don't feel disconnected. And we're seeing the ramifications of this disconnection from organizations and roles through the Great Resignation. So Australia and then in the US, the turnover rate, as people are saying, maybe I'm going to go and do a different job, or maybe I'm not going to go and do a job at all and go and take some time out. And we have seen a sort of a wave, this wave building up as a result of COVID, that people haven't moved jobs. So it's partly explained by that, but it's also explained by people saying, why am I doing this job? This doesn't create the meaning, the purpose, the desire that I had for my life. So what could I do that does offer that meaning and purpose? And that means organizations, and particularly managers, need to be supporting people, helping them make connections between what their values and aspirations are and what the organization is delivering. And then the final thing is always in any role of a leader or manager is the importance of empathy. It's often said that people join organizations, but they leave managers. And the biggest single reason why they leave managers is because that manager doesn't show what I call genuine concern. So that genuine concern comes out in, how was your weekend? Oh, how'd you get on with that football or netball game last night? Oh, how did you enjoy the theatre? And we're just checking in and treating our colleagues as though they are fellow human beings. And if we neglect that informal relationship, and of course, some people want that and need that more than others, but if we neglect showing genuine concern for colleagues, and hybrid working can make that more difficult, but if we neglect it, then we're going to see higher turnover rates and individuals either disconnecting from their job or alternatively leaving their job to go and find a job where leaders and managers in that organization do show genuine concern for them, do treat them as human beings.
I agree. And you made a good point. No, it has to be genuine. Don't just ask the question. Don't just ask the question for the sake of asking the question, because it can feel awkward sometimes. Take a genuine interest. They're the people you're spending half your life with. You should probably want to take a genuine interest in their lives as well. Last question before I let you go. What's your vision for the future of coaching?
Well, I think we're still on that journey. We're still on the journey of building the science. We've got a lot of work still to do around that to understand how my coaching problem, my coaching issue is different from your coaching issue, and how I show up for coaching and how you show up for coaching can be different. So personality, strength, motivation, readiness for change are often factors there, but we need to understand more of those elements. We also need to understand issues around reputation, credibility and trust as ingredients that go together in building the coaching relationship. So science is one part. We need to do more research to unpick the ingredients so we can fully understand how we can move forward in the way that, for example, cancer treatment started with an understanding of what was an appropriate treatment. Now we're moving on towards individualized treatments. When we understand the individual who's there, their particular DNA makeup, we can personalize the treatment. Coaching needs to go in that direction. So individualized interventions and a deeper understanding of the person who's in front of us. And I think the second aspect is about how we continue this revolution, this democratization of coaching. Many organizations, particularly large globals, have been picking this trend up and saying, yes, we want to be doing this across our organization. We want to be providing coaching and creating a coaching culture that allows our people to grow, develop, feel supported. And we want to do that through using an external partner, but we also want to be doing that internally. How do we train leaders and managers throughout the organization to use coaching as their default style? And then the final aspect, I think, is about how we can take coaching into the many other parts of our learning and development places of work and learning. So I'm talking about universities. How can we help in universities students to improve their performance and also their well-being? And there's some work going on, for example, at Rice University in the United States, that is certainly driving forward that agenda. Other universities need to pick up that gauntlet and to bring that into their student communities. And then the other aspect is young people in schools. How could we take coaching into school settings to enable young people there, not only in the developed world, but in the developing world, to optimize their potential? How do we light 1,000 candles across the world to enable those young people to be the best that they can possibly be, the best version of themselves?
Amazing. Well, certainly a future to be excited about ahead of us. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me as well. I know you've got a bit of a cold at the moment, but I appreciate you pushing through and coming on. It's that time of year and coming on the show. Very last thing, where can people connect with you if they want to reach out to you personally and say hi or learn more about CoachHub?
Well, two ways of doing that. First of all, I'd be really delighted if people want to connect to me on LinkedIn. It's always a pleasure to have conversations with colleagues through that platform. And secondly, in terms of CoachHub, they can reach out to me at CoachHub. And at CoachHub, we're going to be launching a special podcast series over the Christmas period that people might want to connect into.
Oh, nice.
Which we're calling the 12 Days of Christmas. So very short, 2-minute clips for people to be thinking about how they might improve their performance next year in 2022 to make 2022 their best year ever.
Amazing. Love it. I can't wait for that. I didn't know about that. Even I was surprised at that one. Excited. Well, what we'll do, as soon as you launch that as well, if you've got a web link, I'll put it. If anyone's listening or whoever's listening right now, if you click the links below, all of those links will be there for you to make things easier. So make sure you go and connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn, check out the website, and we'll also link to the series as well. But thanks again for joining me, and I wish you all the best until we chat again.
Pleasure, Chris. Good to see you. Bye-bye.